I'm going to move along as quickly as I can because I know we're kind of pushing into the lunch hour. But I think that the point that I want to make is that there's actually a lot of good things that D. McCormick and Sergeant Mendez do, and I think there are some inconsistencies that are out there that we need to support. The way I'm going to start this is Brian Williams and Kate Snow did a brief video, did a TV report on our family recently, and it actually highlights exactly this issue that we're talking about. That's why I was so interested in this particular panel. And then I have a couple other examples to talk about, because basically we need to bring the absolute best case to, we have to bring cases to Sergeant Mendez, and then we have to bring cases to Joe McCormick to prosecute. So I'm going to just start this. This will last about 2 minutes, and then I'll be back talking.
Launching a major new ad campaign to warn about the dangers of texting while driving. We all remember past campaigns, don't drink and drive, use your seatbelts. Well, this new ad campaign is aimed at all the people who think they can text behind the wheel because they've done it before, they're in control, it only takes a second. The problem is when it leads to an accident, even a deadly accident, advocates say the person texting often goes unpunished because investigations aren't thorough enough. But as our national correspondent Kate Snow reports tonight, there is great pressure on that to change.
You look and you think, how did he not get a chance to grow up?
Debbie and Ben Lieberman's teenage son Evan was getting a ride to his summer job with friends in June of 2011 when the car he was a passenger in crossed the yellow line, hitting an oncoming vehicle. He was airlifted to a hospital.
He had a lot of internal bleeding, but Evan was awake and he was in pain, and he just said, please just take the pain away, just take the pain away. And obviously they assured him that he would, and then and he said, everything will be okay, and we'll see you after.
But Evan died a month later, and his parents began to question the investigation into the driver's story that he'd fallen asleep at the wheel.
As soon as I saw the phone records, I saw a very different story.
What did they show?
They showed texting throughout the drive.
The driver later admitted to texting earlier in the ride, but said he was not using the phone when the crash happened. The Liebermans were frustrated police never asked to see the phone at the scene, and say the records they subpoenaed indicated it was left in the car, hauled to a junkyard.
What do you think they might have found if they had asked for the driver's phone?
A half-type message is possible. An open Facebook page.
They think there's something there or there's not something there, but if you don't ask for it, you'll never know.
More often than not, advocates say law enforcement officials don't ask for the phone.
It's a catch-as-catch can.
Attorney Todd Clement represents accident victims in civil cases and says distracted driving should be investigated as vigorously as drunk driving.
When somebody is suspected of drunk driving, there's an immediate test to determine whether or not they're drunk. There is no breathalyzer for distracted driving.
But there is this, a device Ohio and other states are already using.
You can scroll down and actually see what was on the device itself. Call logs, contacts.
With a warrant or the owner's consent, Ohio State Highway Patrol can plug in any phone and look for clues about what an Ohio driver was doing just before impact. Here's an example.
These were the last two messages that were sent just before the crash. And then you have the text directly after the crash.
But civil liberties groups have concerns. The U.S. Supreme Court is right now considering whether investigators can search phones without a warrant, or if that violates the Constitution. As for the young man driving Evan that morning, his attorney tells NBC News there's no evidence texting contributed to the accident. The DMV suspended his license for a year. For the Liebermans, that doesn't feel like justice. They want phones checked routinely after any serious accident.
You don't realize how everything falls apart when that one person is gone. If we could save somebody from understanding that as well as we understand it, then we'll have done something.
Kate Snow, NBC News, New York.
Right, so the reason I'm bringing this up also is the natural inclination is that this is a one-off situation, and we're not dealing with this all the time, or this was a while ago. I'm up here and I hear different information back and forth. you know, you see, Sergeant Mendez says that there's all these things that they can do with the phone, and there's a lot that they can determine from it. He's even saying that, you know, they're even familiar with some of the excuses that people will do, and then they can dissect those excuses and get to the bottom of them. But I also heard the panel before this, and well, I'm trying not to show anybody up or anything like that, but I'm also hearing that unless we see this, we can't do anything about it. That's what we heard the panel before. And I don't believe that's the case, and I think that if it is the case, we need to do something about it, but we certainly need something uniform about it in New York. So right now, we have a stat about cell phone use is reporting 80% of distracted-related fatalities in America. I don't believe these statistics. I don't believe that the statistics are being gathered the right way. So I think that we need to throw these out, actually. I hit the wrong button, Seth? Alright, so what I have... Is that the one that says panel on the corner? Is that it? Alright, I'll go on with I can go on this with boys because I have some examples here. What I had is right behind my house. I got circumvented. I was about 100 yards away from my house. I got circumvented. I had to drive 5 miles to get back to my house. The reason was because an electric pole snapped in half. A driver driving a 19-year-old snapped the pole in half. I asked the police about what happened because I have some sensitivity to this, so I asked the questions. They said he fell asleep. It was the middle of the day. It was 12 o'clock in the afternoon. It was on, you know, not I-95 at 2 o'clock in the morning. Turns out he had a restricted license, and there was even a DUI and a drug conviction a few months before. I had the police. What I had for the document was a police report that showed him saying that he fell asleep, but the police officer didn't ask for the phone and didn't do any type of drug testing. That was very similar to what I lived through. The thing that was miraculous about this to me is the guy that drove in the example I'm talking about is actually a classmate of my son's. So if you think about it, two guys in the same year with the same with that kind of damage, you know, the ability to determine this as probable cause is non-existent in a lot of ways, and that's what you know, I'm hearing Joe talk about before, where he said that it is standard operating procedure that they ask for the phone. So
but that, Ben, you should know that that's not always, and that's not everywhere. That's the reality of life. Here's what we're trying to change.
Thank you, sir. Right, that's what you're trying to change, and and that's what I'm trying to change too. And by no means, we set up for this conference to be tough questions and practical solutions. And that's why with the police report here that I have, and you can see it says the driver fell asleep at the wheel right before impact. I took the name out, and I took the police officer out and things like that. That's not what this is really about. But to acknowledge that there really is a problem here because this happened. So this is right in my neighborhood. This is the second time. So now, what I'm showing you here is I'm telling the story about this and my neighbor to another neighbor. And he's saying, oh, you can't believe this, but my son was in college and somebody came to visit him, and he said, the guy just before he got off the phone, the guy texted my son just before he got off the parkway. He said, I'm getting off the parkway, I'll be there in 2 minutes. Okay? He flipped the car over and did this damage right after he did that. So, the point I want to make here is that, and by the way, this is an urban legend. I asked my friend to come here. Vinny, can you wave your hand? I mean, you guys in the middle can't see it, but it's not an urban legend. And it's not, I'm not getting this information off the internet. His son was the one that got contacted. his friend was coming to visit, and the guy flipped the car over. The police did not ask for the cell phone in there. You know, with mine, it was sitting there waiting there for weeks. And here, they didn't ask for the cell phone. So now, I have my neighbor Robin called me after we had one of the press conferences with the governor, and she thanked us for what we were doing because she had been through an incident also. So now this is another mile away from my house. This neighbor of mine. This isn't where the collision happened. But she said her husband Peter was driving and saw the top of the guy's head. He had a brown head of hair on, and it was a straight road. The driver crossed over as it approached, but Peter honked, and he went back. Then, even after he went back and after he was honked at, he came back at him again. This time, Peter couldn't avoid his car, and he was hit. The witnesses there corroborated the story. The police tended to Peter because he couldn't walk. 2 ambulances came. One took Peter to Westchester, and the other took the driver to Connecticut. His wife said to the police officer, "Did you check him? Was he drunk?" He said he appeared fine. Well, where was the phone? The phone was found on the floor cracked, and we gave it back to him. So, in my case, I tried to subpoena the phone records. I got them, and I saw it texting throughout the drive. Robin tried to get the phone records. She tried to subpoena, and they threw it out, saying that they've already surrendered liability. It was more like a civil issue. So, again, it's not an urban legend. I asked Robin to come here, and can you wave your hand? So, did I get the story right? Is that... So again, so now we're planning this conference, and so I get to meet with Tom Zuzzo of the National Highway Traffic Safety Authority, and I'm telling him these stories, and he's like, well, actually, I got one. So this is a regional administrator of the National Traffic Highway Safety Authority, and he was hit by a Suburban going at a pretty high rate of speed. The woman took off after losing her front wheel. She left the scene, but could only go about 1/8 of a mile. She was on her cell phone when Tom walked up, and he began talking to the driver, but the police directed him to an ambulance, and they handled the investigation. He had a conversation with the police and asked if she was drunk. The answer was she was confused. He then asked, but was she on the phone? And the answer is, we don't check that. Okay, did I get that story right? What's that? So, the point I'm trying to make is there's a problem out here, and it needs solution. And if we have people that have the wherewithal to investigate this, then it should be investigated. If we have people that could prosecute it, it should be prosecuted. And I don't have the answers here about what it is. I do believe that phones need to be prominently on police's radar as probable cause. And they should be aware that they do have actions to take, that it's not just, if we don't see it, we can't do anything about it. If police could use a probable cause, it's still evidence I'm not a lawyer, but we have a lawyer on the panel. It's still evidence in something that's a potential crime. They can ask for it and they can subpoena. But what they shouldn't be doing is ignoring it. They shouldn't be saying it's not my job, and they shouldn't be saying that it's out of our hands. Okay, because at this point, this is all our problem. Believe me, what the last point I'm going to leave about this is there was that old game of 6 Degrees of Separation that used to play with Kevin Bacon, and excuse me why I get a little weird with you here, but we used to play this game with Kevin Bacon, like every actor is connected to Kevin Bacon by 6 moves or less. So here's an example: Elvis Presley to Kevin Bacon. Okay, Ed Asner is the connection, and it's 2 moves. It was in Change of Habit. Elvis Presley was in, Ed Asner was in that, and then Ed Asner was in JFK, and so was Kevin Bacon. So my point about that is that there's 6 degrees to being the victim of distracted driving. My family is 0. We're connected once. The average person thinks they're probably 100 times removed. They don't know to ask the same questions that I asked with the police that time because I was affected. I think we're all a lot closer to 1 removed or 2 removed, and I think it's a lot more serious. And that's why when I made the statement about the statistics, how do we know what the statistics are? How do we know what they really are if they're not getting gathered right at the scene? If they're just being pushed away right at the scene. We don't know where the statistics are. So if they're saying it's 20%, what makes you think it's not 60%? If 70% of the people admit that they text and drive, and we've already shown studies that say you're impaired to the level of alcohol, then something's wrong here. One of those statistics are wrong. Either 70% of the people are not texting and driving, or it doesn't impair you to the level of drunk driving. Because if it does, then there'd be a lot more arrests, there'd be a lot more problems, there'd be a lot more this. My theory is there actually are. My theory is that they actually are, but they're not being reported. So that's the problem. That's what the point that I needed to make about this. And like I said, I don't want to keep anybody for lunch, but if there's any questions or any discussion about these topics, we can we'd love to handle them.
And we have lunch scheduled for everybody out these doors, so if you want to head in that direction, then you can present your questions personally during the lunch break.